I also want to reiterate how deeply sorry Canada is for the situation this put President Zelensky and the Ukrainian delegation in. It is extremely troubling to think that this egregious error is being politicized by Russia and its supporters to provide false propaganda about what Ukraine is fighting for.
Why does this government treat Alberta like a fart in the room that nobody wants to talk about or acknowledge?
I heard her say a word that I know is distinctly unparliamentary, and I think she may want to withdraw it. The word was F-A-R-T.
We love your Mr. Trudeau. His family's always been such big fans about that.
Hey everybody. Welcome to episode 1 of the Maple Files. I'm Snow Himbo. This is the homie Yeti Jesus. And so this is episode 1 of a ongoing series we're going to be doing where we cover all things Canadian. We've kind of been kicking this idea around the water cooler a little bit. If you will. And for this episode, we'll cover some Canadian news, but we're also gonna kind of get into kind of like how Canadian politics works, because everybody knows how American politics works. It's because everybody's invested in it, because they're like people say, the 400-pound gorilla stomping all over the world. But there's a lot to get into with Canadian politics also. It is different, but also similar to American politics in a lot of ways. I personally still feel like we also suffer from the same kind of lesser evil voting, two-party system, because we also do first past the post voting. So there's no ranked choice. There's no actual democratic sort of way of doing it. And the process itself kind of traps you in this perpetual cycle of, much like there in America. It's always, we got to vote for the Liberals, even though I'm not really happy with them because we don't want the big bad Conservatives to get in. And then vice versa. They're going, we got to vote the Conservatives in so we don't get the Liberals on board. Difference is we kind of have a third party. The reason why I say kind of is they're kind of in a coalition with the Liberals, which is just fucking awkward shit. And they never really get power. We have other parties kind of similar, but we're going to provide a bit of a crash course and some educational material just so people kind of understand, the gist of it. Intro to how things, unlike the States, so means we're in this weird LARP with Britain and Australia. That's all I can. I mean, like monarchies in 2024. It's a weird LARP. I don't know how else to quantify it.
It is. It's just a throwback to the old systems that we refuse to get away from because people think they have to be in place.
Yeah, it's like, so like, for example, an interesting thing. If, hey Angel, what's going on? Hi CBC voter. Hey Indy. And a hello. Hey everybody. Thanks for coming in. So one interesting thing. If the Queen wanted to, she could come over here and basically, oh shit, is my internet shitting? Oh man. Okay. Well,
that's all right though.
I don't know how to fix that.
Well, what we have is, it's almost like a democratic monarchy. The Queen has to sign off. Well, not the Queen, sorry. The Governor General has to sign off on any laws that we pass, as they are the kind of like a royal assent. And so all of our laws have to go through this system. So we can vote and get things passed through our parliamentary house, and then the queen's bitch could essentially just be like, meh, we're not signing it. And
Yep.
they would be within their legal right to do that. It's an absolute farce that I don't think people realize we have here.
Yeah, it's it's kind of weird in that sense. Anyway, we're gonna start with a little educational video on how Canadian elections work. We got a couple educational videos actually, and a really cool thread on like if you're in Canada, some things you can do to get better informed about the people you might be voting for, who are eventually going to determine, uh, how everything works, I guess. So, without further ado, switch over here.
Canadian elections. Do kids even care? Here's what you told CBC Kids News.
As voters of the future, we should know lots about the electoral system.
I would one day like to be the Prime Minister, or at least an important change-making leader.
I want to know how Canada functions, so I can now make sure that Canada is a country that is inclusive and good to the environment.
So, how do elections work? Here's what you need to know. In Canada, we usually have elections at least every 4 years. Our country is divided up into 338 electoral districts called ridings. Candidates, or people, representing different parties run in each riding, hoping to get the most votes. The winners represent the people in their ridings at the House of Commons in Ottawa. They're called Members of Parliament, MPs for short. The party that wins the most ridings across Canada forms our federal government. The leader of the winning party becomes the Prime Minister. But here's where it gets a little bit complicated. Stay with me. The party that wins the most ridings, known as seats in the House of Commons, forms our federal government. If they win more than half the seats, they form a majority. If they win less than half the seats, but still more than any other party, they form a minority government. That's a win for those other parties, because they can work together and block a minority government from passing laws they don't agree with. So, what does it matter if you can't vote anyway? Well, here's the thing. It's the politicians in the House of Commons who decide the rules for our country. Laws that can affect you and me. Like how old you need to be to vote, when Canada goes to war, and how much money we're going to spend on climate change. Although you may not be able to vote, there are still ways for you, yes you, to be involved with the Canadian electoral system. The MP in your riding acts as a messenger between you and Parliament. For example, you can always send letters to your MP. It's their duty to communicate issues that are important to Canadians to the House of Commons. Then, when an election happens, you can decide if they did a good job or a not so good job at representing you in Parliament. Alright, so we just covered when elections are held, who gets elected, and how you can get involved. Want to know more? Check out our other election videos to learn about the major political parties in Canada and how to vote. For CBC Kids News, I'm Isabel DeRoy Olson.
All right, and that's basically it. Let's see. Oh, was the video laggy? Damn it. I don't know how to fix that. Sometimes that happens where like a video I'm sharing just gets laggy, and I don't know why it happens. I tested my connection before this, and it was like pretty high upload speed. So I don't know. We're just gonna make do with it, I guess.
I think it's sometimes just YouTube and whatever too. So,
Well, yeah.
I'm also in Alberta, Old Man Barker. Yeah, we have no representation for our province. It's crap. We just get told what to do and then have the money taken from us.
Alberta's always Alberta's really, it's always felt like a really interesting place to me because it's
Well, it's
kind of
interesting
like,
because we're like ultra conservative over here, but also we're like up in my old town. We used to have runs for Palestine like years ago. So it's like this wasn't like it's not a new thing up there. It's kind of interesting
yeah,
because we get yelled at as the most racist, and I was like, I live there, man. There's definitely racism, but there's a lot of really good people here. Yeah, for a bit, I'm moving out to the East Coast in 6 months. So, old man Barker asked a question. Sorry.
no, no worries, no worries. Good to
Yeah.
see you engaging with the chat. I can actually do a really cool thing where I can. Where was it? Oh my lord, so bad. Bear with me, guys. Show number one. Oh my god, where's the overlay button? I just saw the
I'm
overlay
in
button.
Calgary, old man Barker.
Well, whatever, fuck it.
We're moving out to Cape Breton though. I'm doing the reverse. All the people from Cape Breton move here, so I'm going that way.
Nice. Yeah, so it Alberta is always an interesting place to me because it seems like the most Americanized province, which is probably because of the oil, because it's
Yeah,
got a ton of oil. You got the Alberta tar sands, for example. Um, and I feel like maybe that kind of rubs off why it's a little more conservative. Every time I visit there, it's really interesting because the cities, like Calgary specifically, seems very Americanized,
yeah.
which is
Well, it's like not so much. Calgary is a lot more white collar, whereas the rest of the province is very much blue collar workers. And they tend to lean towards conservatism because they're like, okay, the government's crap. We can see that. We don't want to pay more taxes into this system. It's not necessarily they don't want the government to exist. It's just, oh, we see our money being wasted. We could waste our own money just as good as the government.
yeah. Well, I mean, that kind of feels like Ontario too. I'm here in
Yeah,
Ontario, nicknamed Onterrible. Uh, quite aptly, we're best known for having a crackhead as a mayor for our largest city there in Toronto. Um, Now we have a premier who's his older brother who's just boring. He's like Rob Ford, but without the fun. Doug Ford.
exactly.
Same dog shit politics. Just I'm slowly trying to privatize absolutely everything and remove any like social or remove all socialized means from Canada. That's in my opinion, that's the long-term goal of conservatives and I'll say liberals as well.
Yeah,
Their long-term
you're
goal
completely
is
right.
to like they want I will give you guys this much. There is definitely a massive America fetish with a lot of our politicians. A lot of our politicians, they would like nothing more than to have Canada just be America Junior and remove any sort of distinction between the two. Have this giant privatized nightmare. And spoiler alert, we're already kind of just a bunch of corporations in a trench coat.
Exactly.
Not to mention, like our introduction video kind of hinted at, our governments are also infiltrated with the moneyed interests, if you will. But that's
Well, and they always funnel like a lot of our taxes into these like construction companies, but a lot of those construction companies are just owned. They're kind of like an umbrella company. They'll just they'll get the money, but then they'll go and like contract out the workers. So a lot of times it's not actually the business that, or it's not the people doing the work or even the business doing the work. It's some umbrella company that just takes the money and then it filters it out to the workers. It's the trickle down economics theory.
Yeah, that's worked so well for us all this time.
Oh yeah.
We're Don't worry, guys. It's gonna trickle down one day. It's just a very slow. It's a very slow. After a couple hundred years, it'll finally trickle down, and you'll be able to buy a nice bunker,
Yeah.
even though it'll be too
Like
late.
they referred to it as trickle down. They knew what they were selling. And people are just like, yes, I love trickle down of water. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it's yeah, and I mean, speaking to the concerns we have up here, same bag, right? Buying a house virtually impossible. We're at the point where you kind of have to win the lottery if you can ever hope to buy a house. I mean, buy a house outright, not like even down payment. It's like you're saving for a while, but
Oh yeah,
you know,
and the prices
yeah,
go up, and then like your mortgage will be set for like 5 years if you want, but then it could magically go up. And it's just like, oh,
mhm,
the interest rates change. I still have the same house though. Why am I now paying more for the same
yeah,
thing?
yeah. You should get like an extra room every time it goes up. In my comrade utopia, when I seize power, that's what I'm gonna do. If your interest goes up, you get an extra room in your house. Um, it has to have a big portrait of me in it though, where you go off to Google. I'm just kidding. I had to throw some Red Scare propaganda in there, but yeah. So it's the same problems really. We have unaffordable housing, cost of living goes up, and wages don't. The last 3 jobs I worked at, it was the same thing. I basically had to claw everybody I know too up here. They have to claw and scratch and beg and plead for like 50 cents more an hour.
Yep.
Like a grand extra added onto your salary every year. They're not gonna budge.
Nope.
And something interesting that happened in our company recently was we had one of those like discussion sessions where it was like, let's listen to the workers, let's hear their grievances. Pretty much every single person brought up salary and pay, and that shit got shut down immediately. We're
Oh
like,
yeah.
let's talk about culture. Let's talk about like, do you feel that it's inclusive enough? And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, just do the pizza party thing. Why don't we
Yeah.
do that? Why don't we just skip to
I,
the pizza party? We know you're gonna do the pizza party.
yeah. My most inclusive thing is getting paid properly. That's what I would like to see.
Yeah, I would like to be included in being able to afford a house. That would
Yeah.
be very inclusive. Can you include the salary? That will allow
Yep.
me to buy groceries without having a panic attack. When you're up at the counter, the ringing counter, and they start ringing it, and you're just watching the fucking number go up, and it's like nonstop anxiety. That's my least favorite thing about grocery shop. They ring it up, you're like, 40, 50, 60,
Yeah.
80, 90, 100, 110, 120. Oh my god, I'm just buying food for the week. What the fuck? And all that's
I
gone up
bought
too.
bread and cheese.
Yeah,
the-
I just wanted a grilled cheese sandwich.
Yeah,
I'm in
it's
debt
insane.
$900.
Yeah. My mother-in-law is extremely frugal. So like she's been watching prices for years. And she's like, it's getting to the point she's like, I'm not paying that for chicken. What are they crazy?
Yeah,
She's
interestingly enough, I don't know because I mean we've had like food scares for years where it's like this
Mhm.
meat's contaminated, this deli meat's contaminated. I don't know if the recent like bird flu developments are affecting this, but I've noticed chicken lately has been dirt cheap. Talking like eight
interesting.
bucks for $8 for a whole bird. And I'm just
Oh,
wondering if there's a connection. If people are getting like they're getting their PTSD from like the pandemic era back, and they're like, "Nah, stay
hmm.
away from the chicken.
That
I'm gonna die."
that's entirely possible too. Because I think there was like an E. coli not too long before the pandemic. Like there was a lettuce E.
Hmm.
coli.
I remember that.
Yeah. So like there was that one for a while, and it might have affected a few other produce. I think they technically said it was like the stuff coming out of Mexico, but I'm pretty sure that's just a fear monger against Mexico. Like, oh, the Mexicans are coming. What? I love Mexicans. They're the greatest people ever. Bring more.
That's another thing too. That's another thing too. We got the same fucking propaganda.
Yeah.
The economy can never be the fault of the big thing. Shut up, fucking motorcycle guy. I showed him. It can never be the fault of our politicians or the corporations that they essentially work for, much like yourselves in the States. It can never be their fault. It's always got to be some outside factor. So if there's a problem with our food source, it couldn't possibly be anybody in charge. We got to blame it on another country or like another group.
Yeah.
It's the same propaganda every time.
It's North Korea that's causing all this. I thought they were a hermit kingdom. Yeah, but they're also causing the world problems too, somehow. Just don't be a communist. And
did you guys know communism's contagious? There's an outbreak.
Yeah, it's contagious because people are like, oh, hey, that makes sense. I explained to one of my friends what socialism, like the basic aspect, like how the people control the means of production in socialism. And they're like, that makes a lot of sense. And I was like, yeah, I know. That's why they don't want you to know about it.
That's why they misinform. That's why they misinform the population. That's why there's so much money and time put into the propaganda. They don't want you to think there's any better options. It's a brilliant scam.
Yeah,
they don't want you thinking there's any other options than just I need to wage slave for just enough to survive in a system where if you don't wage slave for just enough to survive, you just have no money and you starve and you fucking die. That's it.
Yep.
And welcome to life.
Yeah, it's a perpetual like prison planet, as Miss Yeti refers to it.
Prison planet. Oh, that brings me back to like the 2010 InfoWars days. I always said prison planet back in the day.
You know what's funny? I watched InfoWars like way back in the day, before like he even got famous, and I kind of like a lot of his stuff. I was like, all right, yeah. I was like, oh, listen. But it was when he started going like really right-wing conspiracy. I was like, nope, you're losing me, man. You're losing me. But it's still, I feel like some of the things he said, I was like, that man was right on some stuff. I'll give him credit where it's due, but he was wrong on a lot of shit too, though.
My my tinfoil thought about Alex Jones is I've always felt like he's like controlled opposition. So he kind of, it's like predictive programming. He kind of prepares you, because if you see some of the things he predicted, it's like, wow, he was right. But then if you think more about it, you're like, how was he right about that? How is it possible for anybody to be right about that? The more you think about it, the more you're like, this is less, oh my God, this guy's Nostradamus, and more like, where did this motherfucker get this information?
Oh no, he doesn't claim to be like psychic or any of that stuff. He bases all his stuff on like old like news stuff, old like parliamentary papers and stuff. Like he's read a lot of crap. He's just a nutcase as well. He's not like only stupid, but I think he's also a bit of controlled opposition too. I think at one point he might have been, and then he got spooked into being a little more in line.
Yeah. I mean, it just like, I remember this period of time. It was during like the Obama years or whatever. I just remember everybody and their dog just started watching him. Because after 9/11 and all that, he became like super popular because he's the only one offering an alternative explanation as to the confusion of us all being like, what do you mean? What do you mean weapons of mass destruction?
Yeah. So, well, he was my one of my first intros into him was his Bohemian Grove stuff.
Yep.
That's how I discovered him. And then I started back watching other stuff. And I was like, interesting.
Yeah, the
Because the
Bohemian Grove
Bohemian
videos.
Grove is a continuation of what I believe is the Khazarian Mafia. I believe they have some connections. And it's because of the owl, the big wooden owl that they believe in, was where I
That's Malak.
drew the connection.
That's Malak, isn't
Malak,
it?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
Malak.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, guys, go look up that god. Very interesting god. The best god nobody's ever had. Okay, anyway.
He's the biggest owl. He's huge. Huge.
There's never been a bigger owl. Say what you want, though. We don't have any politicians even remotely as entertaining as American politicians. It's just, oh my god,
no.
you guys know how to pick your characters.
America's like a TV show. It's fantastic to watch from afar. And then you realize it's reality. You're like, oh no.
I think that's why Rob Ford. I think
Himbo will be back in a moment. Oh, he's frozen. Oh, that's not a bad. Yeah, Trudeau actually has some really odd looks and features that, I mean, he's basically been set up to be a TV character. All he's ever done was acting. I think we lost Himbo. Oh, Old Man Barker, great poet. Vince McMahon, that he's created so many characters. He really has been quite a few. It's colder where I live. There's no way Himbo. But also, so back to the actual politics of Canada, one of the things we do see a lot of is we're starting to see more and more of mimicking American style politics, where it's more of a show than anything. Even if you start watching like the House of Commons, it's an absolute joke to watch these people. It's like watching kids argue back and forth. So it's become like you can't take any of this stuff seriously. Anything you see anymore is like you're like this. These are not actual adults. That is true. Vince does work a crowd quite well. All right, I'm going to bring up some topics. I used to have. Where did Himbo go? Also, the Canadian internet is horrible because we have a monopoly of two companies, basically Rogers and Bell, or is it? Yeah, I think Rogers and Bell, and then they outsource their interconnection to those small independent ones who are just subsidies of those companies. Yes, we can rename Trudeau Falsto. Also, I like to refer to our democracy as a phomocracy because it's completely fake at this point. There's absolutely no real, what's the word I'm looking for? No tangible evidence that our democracy is any kind of real thing. And that's why Himbo will be right back, I'm sure. And the thing with Polyev is he's the exact same thing. He's just another controlled politician. He's been in politics so long, there's no possible way for there's no actual way for any of our politicians to get actually true. Like even the last thing Theresa May did was, oh, she got offended by the word fart. That's, who cares? I got people dying in hospitals. I don't care about the word fart. Like, that's the least of our concerns. You should focus more on keeping politicians accountable, not necessarily words they say. Exactly. Yeah. Career politicians. I used to say as a joke that if we slap a patch on the back of them, we could just call them a bike gang, and there's no different. So, same thing with all the gangs in the States, the mafia. All the mafia in the States all basically got intertwined with the government through the CIA during the drug expansion era. They needed a way to expand drugs, figured the mafia was the easiest way. Yeah, I don't like any of our politicians. So I've yet to meet one that I trust. Almost any in Western politics. So anyways, I'm gonna find my phone. Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, yeah. The one time my wife ever tries to call me, it's in the middle of a show. She apologized though. She's like, I can't believe I called you there. I was like, I can't believe you called me. This never happens. I'm just gonna bring up the show notes so that I can get back to where we're supposed to be. So I believe we're talking about what is Parliament at the moment, which I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'm not the most up to date on how Canadian politics work. Like, I understand like the system and stuff, but I don't know the nitty gritty of like political reform, which I have to get much more educated on because in order to help people, we need to understand more of what we're talking about. So a lot of the things that I focus on is renewable energy sources. So things like 3D printing wind turbines. You can also apply this kind of stuff to using sorry. All right. Well, Himbo, while we're waiting for Himbo to get back, does anyone have anything they would like to chat about? Put it in the chat. Actually, yeah, Nilo, agreed. I think we're very much like a passive aggressive nation. We just kind of we're like, okay, yeah, we understand what the politics are, but then when we start like talking about the actual systems, like when you get down to it, I think a lot of us will start to realize we have no idea. I'm not. I don't. I'm not sure about the actual representation, but I know Alberta and the West in general, just by the systems, because of how concentrated the populations are in like Ontario and Quebec, that we don't get any real representation by the West because because are sparsely, densely populated. And then when we actually do need changes, like if you look at like the transfer fees, like Alberta sends to the west or to the east, it isn't a great system because like a lot of Albertans, we don't get any of the like in Quebec they have cheap daycare. Was it even like a lot of their medical stuff is a lot more covered than Alberta is. So, and I don't know if it's necessarily if it's because the money's going out there or if it's just our politicians in Alberta are so much more corrupt that they finance it to their buddies and their systems into the capitalist system, and then it's like, oh well, we're creating jobs, but you're creating more and more rich people. Yeah. So I want to get more interested in the politics of the East Coast when we get out there, because I feel with how small the population is, the area we're moving, I can do a lot more direct conversation with our politicians. Like I think the island we're moving to is 4,000 people, so I'm pretty sure I could find the politician and show up at his house. Like, I have some questions, sir, or ma'am, whoever it is, I haven't looked. But that's one of the things you can do actually in a direct democracy is you need to start contacting our representatives. Make sure they know we're not happy. I don't mean like threaten them or any of that kind of stuff. Just be very firm and direct that the reasons you're not happy. Make sure they know what is happening. Yeah, he also wrote a bunch of crap when he was the premier of Alberta that screwed us during COVID, where he would, like any politician, I'm sure any was. All right, he's coming back soon. But anyways, I'll keep talking. Yeah, Kenny was also like the biggest proprietor for the COVID response. And during that time, him and his cronies wrote having rooftop parties. And I think it was the same in a lot of provinces. They were just being blatantly hypocritical, and to the point that no one wants to believe them. And even the people that wanted to still do things, like it's hard to justify doing the good things when you see this stuff happening with your politicians. There's no reason like anything, you should lead by example. If you're telling people they have to do something, I own my own business. I had a small little delivery company. I would never ask people to do anything I wouldn't do myself. Sure, I may have had to ask them to do it on days that I couldn't do things, but there's nothing I would ever ask them to do it. And also, one of my systems was whenever my workers needed money, I would loan them the money and they would just pay me back when they could. Like, it made more sense than being like, trying to go to a bank for like a $200 loan for like a couple weeks so they could get food for their adults. And I was paying them $15 an hour. It's not like I wasn't paying them good money, but the price of living just got so out of control. And a lot of us weren't great with handling money, so me included. So I kind of just did whatever I could. But a lot of times, and that's where sorry, I've lost trot. Let's get back to focus. Yeah, and yes, Old Man Barker. This happens incredibly much. Politicians will rally against opposition policies or any of that kind of stuff, but once they get in, they either like it, or if they were proponents of it before they got in, they hate it now. And a great example is, I know we're talking about Canadian politics, but I'm going to use the American politics for the start. Before Biden and Kamala got into politics, they were talking about how they would not touch a Trump vaccine, as if Trump was in the actual like labs doing work with his little hands. This is the greatest vaccine. It'll be huge. Like, it's the same scientists that were, yeah. And I was a bartender. Sorry, that's a great point, Nilo. I'll try to go back. Sorry, I'll get back to that one as soon as I finish with Kamala and Biden. They would refuse to take the Trump vaccine. They're like, oh, we'll never take this vaccine. And then as soon as the election they won, they're like, anyone that doesn't take this vaccine is some kind of right-wing theory. And I was like, 2 months ago, you were saying you would not take the vaccine, as if Trump was literally in the actual like labs making the vaccines himself. Like, it's just, you see this stuff and you're like, I can't take anyone seriously. Yes, Nilo. The thing with liquor is carrying money with liquor. That's very much, I think one of the things we've seen go up is anyone with ADHD or brain issues are very bad at what's the word I'm looking for? At impulse control. So, like, you know, when you go to the store and there's like all these things at the front counter, they're referred to as impulse buys, because they're just quick things that you want to buy really quick, but they're also the things that are marked up the most. So, like, you see chocolate bars, chips, gum, drinks, even like lighters or anything quick you can pick up just as you're getting to the checkout. Those things are dramatically marked up, and they are also the things that have seen the most in shrinkflation. If you look back at like a Snickers bar, I think they've dropped, I think it's like 20-30% now, how much the food packaging, and it's more so the quick buys. Like, the pack of a chicken hasn't shrunk because we actually buy it based on the price of chicken. So the price of the chicken has gone up, but the actual chicken size, they can't really change because it's a chicken. But if you look at like the 2-liter orange juices, they're now 1.89 liters. The packaging still looks exactly the same, but you now have a smaller package that no one will notice till one day you're like, wait a minute, wasn't that 2 liters? Because most people, you won't notice for a long time. It'll just be one day like, wait a minute, son of a. And so chocolate bars and candies are a great example. If you go and look, try and find like pictures of old Snickers or old Mars bars or any kind of old candy bar. Look at the weight on them. Then go look at the weight on a new chocolate bar. You'll notice about 20% difference. I wish I knew how to share my screen in this one. I have OBS set up and I'll use it next time. And so I can kind of demonstrate a little bit. Yeah, actually, that's a good point as well, old man Barker. CTE, any kind of brain damage. Hey, Simbo, you're back.
Sorry, everybody.
We were talking about shrinkflation while you were gone.
Oh yeah, fuck. Anyway,
I was explaining about how. What? Go ahead.
I just I want to address the elephant in the room. Obviously, I had a bunch of connection issues. This week, I'm gonna figure that out. Because I've had some on and off connection issues, like intermittently. This week, I'm gonna figure out a solution to that. Because yeah, obviously,
I got a buddy who works for Shaw up in the north. I'll contact him. He's my guru for tech.
I'm gonna be honest. I think it's just Fido's shit. I think that's it. I think Fido just sucks, and that's like
Oh,
the problem solved of the whole
okay.
thing.
As I was mentioning when earlier when Himbo was gone, our telecoms all own these small subsidiaries. So
Mm-hmm.
you buy Fido, but they're using Telus' numbers. So what happens is the connection, they purposely will degrade the connection to um to Fido. So I'll help you work on that as well too.
Yeah, that's another weird thing. I don't know if you covered like the strange, unique relationship Canada has with our telecommunication services, but
I was telling him basically we have a monopoly where it's only like
Mhm.
Bell and Rogers are the only two. And they
and
essentially, well, not essentially, they have a monopoly.
yeah, and it's such a big problem. This is such a big, like, monumental problem that we had a day where Rogers went down, and because of how intertwined we are with Rogers, our whole country ground to a halt. You couldn't
Mhm.
pull out money. You couldn't use Interact machines. Internet was down. There was no business. There was like
Nope.
nobody was doing business. Everybody was home from work. They were just sitting there tapping their feet, calling their telecoms, going, "What's up?" for
Yeah.
like the whole day.
Yeah.
Oh my
Well,
god, I remember
and
that.
can you imagine if electromagnetic attack comes on us? They're not going to get that up in a few hours. That's going to fry a lot of cables, right? Like so,
Oh yeah.
like that's one of the things. Like I know we talked about preparing for the future, understanding what they can do. Um, Work on making a bartering system within your own communities. Find a
hmm
way to figure out how you guys can trade stuff, because or at least borrow stuff and make sure that people are not wrecking other people's stuff, because that'll be the biggest detriment to any of us green in society where we can borrow and stuff. Is if you start wrecking other people's stuff, it's going to terminate that theory immediately.
Oh, I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little a small part of me is hoping that an EMP does knock everything out, if only because then I can finally just be a full-time fisherman and just, you know, stop this
Hey,
whole wait
you can
slave
come out to the
thing.
property. The ocean is right there. We'll get you a little dinghy. We'll get you a captain boat, hat, and you go out fishing.
All
You
right,
and the
I'm gonna
missus come out.
all right, but I gotta cut my hand off and put a hook on it.
That's
That
fine.
just has to happen.
My wife is a nurse, so I've played a surgeon on TV. No, I haven't, but go with me for the story. We'll get one of those irons. We'll just cauterize the
Perfect.
wound. You'll be good to go.
My wife will be like, I married the biggest clown in the world. This is my life
No,
now.
no,
I've been
because she'll
sucked into
meet
clown
me
world.
and just be like, "Oh, I got lucky. I could have met this idiot." That poor
No,
woman is a saint.
yeah.
Dorothy
I mean,
Mantooth is a saint.
oh man. Like, so we've got the telecoms that are basically a monopoly.
Mhm.
And it's like you said, it's such a fucking scam because like if you're like, oh well, to hell with Rogers, I'll go with Bell. Oh, to hell with Bell, I'll go with one of these other companies. It doesn't matter. It all just
Yeah, you're
goes up
still
to the
using it.
top. And they own all the towers. So they've got everybody by their cojones is
Mhm.
effectively. So anyway, who wants to learn about Parliament? Let's hope this video isn't as choppy as the last one, but I think I've figured all that out. Give me a couple days and I'll test it out on politically
It
homeless.
might
But
be easier to run the videos from my feed too. So we could always do that later on.
okay. We'll see how this goes. I only have a couple videos, so it's not the end of the world. Most of it's just kind of content to talk about it. Yeah, you're right, old man Barker. Sadly, for now, there is no way around. The only way around is to nationalize the telecoms, which is what I've been screaming from the rooftops for years upon years.
Well, we give them so much money anyways. Why not? It's like, if we're gonna give them money, can we at least get the profits too? Fuck.
I mean, yeah, can you imagine the amount, like, I can only imagine the amount of social services if they nationalize our telecoms. Like, oh my god. It would be insane. Okay, all right, kids, let's learn about Parliament. Let me just... Oh, I'm blinded by the glow, just like every day I go on Twitter.
Parliament is the heart of Canada's democracy. Located in the national capital, Ottawa, it's the country's federal legislature. This means Parliament makes laws that affect the whole country, in certain areas like fisheries, trade, defense, or the postal service. These are things that affect all Canadians, no matter where they live. Parliament has three parts: the monarch, the Senate, and the House of Commons. The Senate and House of Commons are where parliamentarians meet to represent Canadians and discuss and debate issues that matter to them. As well as proposing its own bills, the Senate debates, studies, and refines proposals for new laws passed by the House of Commons. Senators are appointed to represent every province and territory in Canada. They offer regional and minority perspectives on issues discussed at Parliament. The House of Commons proposes, debates, reviews, and passes bills. This is where most new laws start their journey. Members of Parliament in the House of Commons are elected by Canadians like you. Each member of Parliament represents a specific area of the country called a constituency or riding. The third part of Parliament is the monarch. The monarch is the country's head of state and is represented by the Governor-General in Canada. After the Senate and House of Commons both pass a bill, the Governor-General signs it into law. The Governor-General also opens new sessions of Parliament and has the power to dissolve Parliament, which triggers an election. These are just a few of the Governor-General's roles. Together, the three parts of Parliament create new laws and tackle issues that impact the lives of all Canadians.
Whatever, Cowboy Kitty, I'm gonna go and get my feelings checked out for free. Take that.
Hey, Quicksilver fan, thanks for coming in. Hey, I used to live in Toronto. Hey, social emotional learning. Hey. Time for a telecoms convoy. I agree. Time for a proletarian convoy, period. We're gonna end it. We're gonna end the show with that later on. But I have some thoughts on that. You know what I realized during this video? We just Control-C, Control-V the UK. This isn't even original, really. Like, what are we doing? It's not surprising, given the fact that we're essentially, part of the monarchy. Everybody was saying God save the king after the queen perished in a freak gasoline fight accident.
Like, if there's a God, he is not saving that mother.
No, absolutely not. And maybe that would be a good episode to get into sometime down the road. Actually, hold on, give me one sec. I came up with 2 ideas for episodes. What is... give me one sec. I'm hearing noise out of somewhere. What the hell?
Is it inside your head? Is it voices?
It could be voices inside my head, for sure. Yeah. What is that? Okay, that's going to drive me insane. There we go. It was a Baldur's Gate soundtrack that started randomly playing. I don't know.
I hate when that happens. Where's the sound coming from? Or music?
Oh, it's my least favorite. I'm just going to write down these 2 notes real quick for videos because fun thing about ADHD, you have to write down your thoughts immediately or they will be gone for 10 years and then come up randomly when you don't need them anymore.
Yep, that's... Hi, cowboy.
Okay. All right. What's next? Okay, so here's a cool thread that one of the comrades on Twitter posted. She's really good for this sort of information. Just make sure. There you go. Okay, so if you're Canadian, follow the Lefty Canadian Radical. She's really super informative and really tuned into politics. But how to get more politically informed in Canada tutorial thread. Did you know you can learn what our MPs are really up to without bias and spin? Well, it's true. Take advantage of a great resource. Here's how. So step one, look up the website for our parliament. It's ourcommons.ca. See, goes right there. Step two, from the homepage, click on the title called Members. Step three, under the tab Members, click on Members of Parliament. Step
Yeah,
four,
very
begin
much the same,
typing.
Quicksilver.
Similar to the UK. Yeah, we have the House of Commons too, and it's just I don't even know how to explain the House of Commons to Americans. They're just like, I saw a video of that and I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, we don't know what's going on either. So we're all just that's why I had to include it in the intro video for this show. Because it's just like you wouldn't believe what happens in the House of Commons unless someone told it to you. Yeah. Under members, click Members of Parliament. Step four, begin typing the name of the MP you want to learn about. As you do, their profile might pop up on its own. If it doesn't, click the search button to visit the profile. For example, Zarin O'Toole. This is important. On the MP's profile, click on the tab that says Work. Under the Work tab, click on the tab that says Chamber Votes. Then select the tab that says All Votes by this member. Now, finally, you can now view the entire voting record for your MP. You can select by Parliament sitting and session or by the type of motion. You can also sort by how this member voted. So that's really important in getting informed because, for example, if a politician is running for prime minister, say one who leaned heavily into the grievances that people had during the pandemic, and now he's trying to wash Canada over with boring Harper era conservatism. Not naming anybody, of course, just giving a generic example that's definitely not something I'm deeply friggin' concerned about at the moment. I hate Pierre. He's garbage. You can go and look up their history. So any politician, you can go and look up like, okay, what do these guys buy into? What are they invested in? And you can also draw conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you see trends, certain voting trends with those politicians, you can draw some pretty easy conclusions, such as, oh, this person usually votes in favor of pro-landlord policies, for example. Not that our conservatives are a bunch of landlords or anything. That's crazy.
They would never do that.
I'm just saying they're not fans.
I love how they think business is when you just buy crap and charge people more money for it. Oh no, I'm in a business. You didn't make anything, you useless twat.
The funniest thing about conservative politics, at least in Canada, is like they have this weird delusion where they think everybody is a business owner. I don't know if you've noticed that by their rhetoric, but it's all like, we need to make it easier for small businesses and the little guy, but they never talk about like the worker. They never talk about the proletariat. Their rhetoric is always geared towards like business owners, like HVAC business owners or like a guy who owns a landscaping company or some crap. And it's like, that's great. I'm all for mom and pop shops. Be nice if they were co-ops, but I digress. But I mean, they still have workers. And, you know, you're still extracting the surplus value of their labor from those workers, even if you are a ma and pa shop. So, it's just something I noticed with like conservative rhetoric. It very much feeds into this whole like anybody can be a business. And it's like, well, no, actually, unless you're all like a sole proprietor, and you're all just going to be your own worker. I don't know how this works.
Essentially doing contract work then.
Mm-hmm.
Which is not fun because you want stability too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like the gig economy, it's pretty much blown up, unfortunately. Okay, so let's see here. What else do we want to get into next? This is a curious story. I'm just going to give you guys some Canada news and maybe give you all a bit of context, if only just to highlight the stark similarities. So, Canadian killed near Gaza border after threatening forces with knife, says the Israeli police. Israeli police. Sorry. I'm at the point where I can't even say it without laughing. Israeli police say Canadians...
police said no, they didn't.
No, they did. Israeli police lied about, like, that's, yeah. Say a Canadian citizen was killed Monday after threatening local security officials with a knife near the border with the Gaza Strip. Wow. I can't imagine how that happened. The Israeli says the man drove to the entrance of Netiv Hasara, just 300 meters north of the Gaza border. The military says the man left his vehicle with a knife and approached the local security patrol, who opened fire and killed him. I mean, yeah. That's what I do. I would run up with a knife to military and die.
Well, actually, in fairness, knife attacks are something that they do see, but still, like how far away was this guy that they need to shoot him? Like, oh, he had a knife, like 600 yards back. Like came at us. Like, that's not justifiable.
Well, it gets a little better. Israeli police told the Associated Press the man was Canadian, though the Israeli military would not confirm the nationality, instead saying that the suspect is a foreign national who arrived in the area from within Israeli territory, not from the Gaza Strip. Israel's ambassador to Canada posted the military statement on X. Unconfirmed reports have named the man, while some claim he is an American citizen. Canada's consular officials in Israel are gathering information on the episode, a spokeswoman said. Global Affairs Canada is aware of an incident involving a Canadian citizen in Israel, wrote Charlotte Floyd. Due to privacy considerations, no further information can be disclosed at this time. The development comes amid a wave of stabbings during the 9-month war in Gaza. Again, no idea why this is happening. This is just... Is something going on?
No, I don't think so.
Gosh. Which Israel launched after Hamas militants killed 1,200 people, including soldiers, in an attack last October. So, this is a good way to show how Canadian media differs from American media. And it doesn't. It really doesn't. If you look at this fucking paragraph. Sorry, I'm failing at everything tonight, but whatever. They lead on with who the Hamas militants have killed. So they start, that's the most important thing. Then the next paragraph. Meanwhile, the Israeli military on Monday ordered the evacuation of part of an area in the Gaza Strip. It is designated a humanitarian zone, saying it is planning to begin an operation against Hamas militants who have embedded themselves in the area and use it to launch rockets towards Israel. Then, another paragraph later, they begrudgingly say the Hamas-run health ministry in the Gaza Strip says nearly 39,000 Palestinians have been killed in Israel's war in the territory, including militants. Crazy, they just died? Is that like they just, it's like a, I don't know, like a casualty, I guess, right?
They tripped.
Again, it's no different. Actually, the one area where it is different is some of our media is actually state funded. Which is why a lot of us see like very specific ideological spins with our media. But then again, in the States, it's all corporate funded.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, realistically, these are all basically the same working together bodies.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get into more later about the merging of corporations and state and what that means for your Western country. Fascism, it means. Yeah. Canada for months has called for a ceasefire and more humanitarian aid to reach the territory where buildings have been damaged and where the United Nations say no place is safe for the 2.2 million Palestinians living. Which is interesting, because if you're calling for a ceasefire, you wouldn't be, like supporting one side over the other, right? You wouldn't be doing that because that would be completely hypocritical.
That'd be crazy.
You definitely wouldn't be lending like direct support to this conflict for one side, especially if like the casualties aren't even close. Yeah. That's just a good example of like it's the same framing from our media. It's the framing of like, we're going to present the important casualties first, then we're going to provide like a cope, like a cope paragraph, then we're going to begrudgingly get in with very dishonest framing, mind you, the actual death toll of the Palestinian people, because they can't just compare those two side by side in the same paragraph. Because immediately people will be like, oh my God, what are they doing?
Yeah.
Because you're like, 1,200, 39,000. Well, this is one-sided.
Well, even if you look at the deaths through the years, it's like that for like 60 years.
Yeah, it's my favorite. And Canadian media does that too, where they treat this in a vacuum of like, October 7th was the first thing that ever happened in this conflict.
Yeah, nothing.
And then how many 9/11s did Netanyahu say? It was like 26 9/11s or some shit.
Yeah.
And then everything after that is because of that conflict. There's no like, gee, why would Hamas do something like this? And their thing is like, oh, they just hate Jews. And it's like,
oh, they're terrorists. They're terrorists.
Yeah.
Like, pretty sure the ones defending their land are not called terrorists, but who am I to judge?
Reverse Uno. It's always a reverse Uno. Every single time. But I digress. Let's move swiftly along. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this video. I saw this spicy hot take on Canada's housing crisis, and it's an interesting perspective.
I don't know this video earlier, so it is interesting. Yeah,
I don't know this guy's ideological bend. Just kind of interesting. But I'd like to discuss it just because there definitely is, like, one of the biggest issues in Canada is the housing crisis, and the Conservatives say we just got to build more houses, which is, of course, they're going to say that. That's a very pro-landlord sort of messaging. And the NDP is like, well, maybe we should have more public housing, which is an incredibly safe thing to do when you have no real power. Let's be. It's. I'll give a comparison to the Americans out there. The NDP is like the Squad for America. AOC, Bernie, the Squad. They're kind of in the same boat where they can say a lot of stuff, but when push comes to shove, they're aligning with the liberals. Same thing with, the Squad, with Bernie, with AOC. It's all these kind of LARPer types, right? So let's we're gonna check out this video and then see where we get.
Imploding. And basically, we have to go all the way back to 2008 when the CMHC started buying mortgages to understand exactly what happened here. You see, back in 2008, there was a global financial crisis. The Federal Reserve in the United States dropped interest rates massively during that time to new lows that nobody had ever seen. And the Bank of Canada followed straight after the Federal Reserve and did exactly the same thing. At the same time, you had a bank bailout called the IMPP that was rushed through, and you also had the CMHC that was buying mortgages en masse during that time. And these were the type of mortgages that were the bad ones. They were the subprime ones that were lent out in the period leading up to 2008. But when you actually look at the Canadian household position in terms of debt, it was actually much lower than the United States. When you look at the United States, household debt was much higher. The households in the United States were much more leveraged. So the fact is, in Canada, what happened was when interest rates went down during that period of time, you then saw the housing market boom, literally a couple of years after that. By 2010 and 2011, you already saw housing prices that began to overtake the previous highs. Some areas like Alberta were particularly hard hit by the global financial crisis and the recession, since it relied a lot on oil and gas and mining, and financing during that period was very hard to get, so that meant that the economy was really suffering back then. What you saw happen since then, during the Conservative government, remember, because the Conservatives were in power from 2006. This was Stephen Harper's government. Pierre was actually a part of that government during that time. And the interesting thing is, you saw housing prices that just continued to rise during that period of time, which eventually led to the election of Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau was a leftist populist candidate, and Justin Trudeau managed to win a majority during that election. Some of the key issues that were campaigned on during that time were exactly the same issues as you see the main status quo parties campaigning on right now, such things as a high cost of living, housing affordability. They were all bad back then, and they're still bad now. In fact, they're a lot worse now thanks to Justin Trudeau. You could say that he definitely helped amplify the situation that already the Conservatives had created through prior bailouts. And then Justin Trudeau in 2020, under his government, they actually did another bailout and were buying mortgages through the Bank of Canada and through the CMHC to stimulate lending into the Canadian housing bubble. Now, the problem is most average people in Canada had no idea of the dynamic that was going on. What was going on was very similar to the bailout that was done in 2008. However, unlike back in 2008, this was accompanied with an unprecedented amount of government stimulus that was injected into the economy. And the housing market could not have got more distorted during that time. Many of you will remember that there were lots of people that were taking mortgage deferrals. In fact, the numbers were quite staggering, the amount of people that were taking mortgage deferrals. And during that time, people weren't really doing a lot during 2020 and 2021. So that meant that they were able to save up a lot of money. And they did save up a lot of money. And where did that money go? It went straight back into the real estate market and straight back into the bubble. The housing market in Canada after 2020 was one of the most distorted housing markets in the world. To the average person, It just looked like an incredibly strong housing market that would never collapse. This housing bubble could never fail. People used to call me an absolute lunatic for saying that the Canadian housing bubble will crash, and it is a certainty, and it's just a case of when it's going to happen. The mania that ensued in 2021 and 2022 was really a sign that we were in the final stages of this bubble. Generally, when you see a blow off top, when you see people go completely insane over a certain market, that means you are at the top of that market. And I remember hearing so many people during that time who said real estate will never go down in price. This is it. If you don't get in now, you're never going to get in. The fact is, nobody could afford to get into the market back then. But the way the banks work in Canada is they prioritize the people who have assets against those who don't. I mean, at the end of the day, that sounds kind of logical because the banks have the assets of that person, then say, okay, well, if you default on the loan, we're going to take your assets. But that only works to a certain point. It only works if values are ever increasing. And of course, the Canadian banks were quite vocal that housing prices were just going to go up and up and up and up. Now, I'm willing to bet that high-level executives at the banks knew that the housing market was going to crash at some point, and they just continued on with this because, as they know from the past, such as with the Conservatives and with the Liberals, they are guaranteed pretty much to get a bailout because the government, after all, is insuring a lot of these mortgages. So what this created was insane moral hazard, which went into the lending industry, which meant that there was massive, rampant amounts of mortgage fraud, people changing documents. I've heard from people in the lending space who worked in compliance within the banking system who've told me that they were targeted with certain amounts of mortgages that they would have to and need to get approved. I've heard from people who said that they've had colleagues fired for questioning and putting red flags on different mortgages that have come through. So the fact is, this went right up to the top in the banking system, and people knew what was going on. They just didn't care because the amount of money that was going into the real estate industry and the banking industry was absolutely massive. But it was all at the cost of the average person. And who is going to bear the brunt of the responsibility of what's going to happen now this bubble is imploding and values are reversing and the Canadian banks have hundreds of billions of dollars of mortgages that are effectively in default on their books? They're in shadow default. You see, because nobody could afford a home during that period of time, during the mania, people opted towards these fixed payment variable rate loans, and they sound as stupid as the name. Basically, these loans had a fixed payment, but the rate, the interest rate on the loan was variable, meaning that if your interest rate went up, that would essentially mean the amount of your payment that was allocated towards interest would go up. And not only that, that sometimes meant that the payment would actually exceed the amount of interest that you need to pay, and that would go into a negatively amortizing mortgage. These are similar products to the products that were around during the global financial crisis. And the amount of fraud that was going on has been completely understated. I mean, I have spoke to so many people within the industry that have just said, Luke, you would be absolutely shocked at the numbers when it comes to mortgage fraud. It is unbelievable. And it's quite obvious that people would have needed to commit fraud in order to get into the housing market. Because you look at markets like Toronto, Vancouver, Mississauga, Ottawa, many other places, and the average income, the medium income, it doesn't make any sense. Nobody could afford to go out and buy a home. So people started to fiddle their income, and they thought, well, it doesn't really matter because housing prices only go up, and I'm probably going to just sell this in a couple of years for a profit. Those people tried to blame the Bank of Canada for their poor decisions, saying that the Bank of Canada promised that they would have interest rates low for a very long time, a very vague statement that they made. But they forget that the Bank of Canada also said that they were extremely worried about what was going on in the housing market, and also said that housing prices don't just go up. But people conveniently ignored the Bank of Canada saying that. And now the Canadian housing bubble accounts for 40% of the economy. In fact, it's much higher than that. If you look at this RE/MAX report, you can say that then they were saying that housing as part of the economy economy was nearly 40% of GDP, but right now it could be way higher than that. And that means that when the housing bubble implodes, as it is right now, that affects the economy massively. So why can't we see it in the economy? Well, the economy is flatlining right now. It's not really growing that much, but part of the reason of why it's still flatlining and growing and not crashing is simply because of the mass migration program. You see, you have to think of mass migration as putting up a veil in front of the economy so that people can't actually see what's going on behind the scenes. They can't see all the skeletons that are hidden back there. So basically, by instigating this mass migration program that has boomed, it has also sent Canada into a cost of living crisis. And it has also sent Canada into a terrible per capita depression that has not been seen by any other country in the G7 or G20. The per capita GDP in Canada has been absolutely crashing, and many different international organizations and media have picked up on how bad this is and are predicting that it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. You see, people ask what the solution is here, and unfortunately, with so much damage done, there is no good solution. The only solution is
there is a solution, but this guy ain't gonna like it.
No, he's not.
that you try and educate people and get them up to speed on how the government influenced this housing bubble, how the government effectively crashed the economy behind the scenes.
Last. It's gonna pop, and soon.
I just like to say, is that not the ultimate nightmare blunt rotation?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
God damn. Imagine being stuck with those two motherfuckers in a room together. Ugh.
And made it more reliant on real estate. And then ask yourself, do any of the political parties, the status quo political parties like the Conservatives, the Liberals and the NDP, are they going to do anything drastically different to change this? And look at history. See, have they done it in the past? Why are they going to do it now? And you will find out that unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. You see,
I remember this guy in China did something drastically about it, but again, you're not going to like it.
the reason why I have a passion for producing these videos is because it's educating people on how the system works. And once people understand how rigged the system is, how CMHC is not an institution that is helping you buy a home, it is helping banks get bailed out, then you understand that we don't need that institution and we would be better off without it. Once you understand how mass migration puts a veil in front of the economy, it becomes very easy to then understand how it's actually ruining the economy. And this isn't a dig at immigrants. After all, I'm an immigrant myself, so that would make me a hypocrite. Immigrants.
Okay. I just caught on to what he's actually trying to do here. You guys probably caught on to it too, because you're smart. Again, our politics aren't that dissimilar. If you look, he's going, you know, because of the immigrants coming in, and you know, it's the immigrants that are causing the problem, not the internal contradictions of the economic system we live in. But yeah.
Are doing a lot of the jobs that Canadians won't do themselves. They're filling all those jobs and they're literally living in poverty. So I would say have a massive heart for the immigrants that are here today, because those people are suffering tremendously. In fact, they are the modern day slaves of Canada. And the thing is, I want an end to that slavery. We're doing a disservice to them. And I think it's absolutely terrible. And not only that, the reason why they are doing those jobs and Canadians aren't doing those jobs is because by bringing in more and more workers, you suppress the wages, especially for low-skilled, low-wage jobs. And who does this benefit? This benefits massive corporations that have the cash and have the money to pay the higher wages, but just choose not to invest in their workers. And it's no wonder why you see productivity that is absolutely tanking. This is Canada, and it needs to change. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly...
Okay, dipshit, that's enough. So, that was one take, I suppose, on the housing crisis. I have some thoughts. So, first and foremost, probably saw some standard conservative tropes there, but he touched on a lot of truth too. So it is true that our government does bail out these banks, these huge ass corporations. But I mean, America, is that so dissimilar from what y'all have going on down there? That's what happens when the correct conclusion to this is to understand who your politicians really work for. They don't work for the workers. They don't work for the people actually keeping the world turning. Never a bailout for you or me. It's always a bailout for massive corporations. I think that guy's probably like a capitalist. He's probably a landlord of some kind, some variant of landlord. But he's got, he's pointing out some uncomfortable truths, but where these guys really get you is they start angling towards the conclusions. And every conservative is going to blame the same thing. They're going to go, the government's the problem. They don't ever want to look past that. They never want to push past the why is the government the problem?
Yeah.
Is it just government?
No, it's just the government. There's definitely no rich capitalist behind them paying them off for that. No.
Exactly. Yeah, there is some truth there. But he also left out some other stuff because he probably doesn't have the analysis to kind of tackle this. Number one, this wouldn't be as much of a problem as it is if the working class had the purchasing power to be able to keep up with this. That's also why the cost of living is tanking. And if you're referring to that and comparing it against other G7 countries, same thing. What's
same thing?
You got to ask yourself, well, what are these other G7 countries doing? For referring to the any other G7 country than America, at least they all have better social programs. For all its faults, the NHS absolutely windmill dunks on our healthcare system. It's not even close. Like, oh my god. And I'm sure a lot of Brits have their valid criticisms of that system too. But the less safety net you have to deal with the internal contradictions of capitalism, the worse your country is going to be. That said, what were your takeaways, Yeti? What did you think of that weird man in his stock photos?
I know, with the immigrants, they do bring them in to keep the wages low. He's not wrong about that part. But still, at the end of the day, is the problem is we're letting these corporations do that, and it turns into a slavery type system. Because a lot of them will bring them over, but if they don't fulfill their contract, they ship them back home. So it's like, if you do anything wrong, you could be fired and get shipped back home. So he has a point about that, but he's not looking at it in the proper way. He's not still blaming it on the corporations and the capitalists. He's still trying to say it's somehow the immigrants' fault, which it's not.
No.
It's wholly on. It's a design system specifically to get people angry at immigrants.
Not just that either. I mean, in a way, it almost feels like what corporations are trying to do. They've already gamed out the system. This is just a bit of a Marxian analysis for it. They've already gamed the system where it's like, oh, we can just pay people in other countries like $1 an hour. They'll do the labor and we'll make way more profit. We don't want to pay nearly as much. But the problem there, you're not getting that purchasing power. You're not getting that purchasing power back. That's going to another country. You're not getting that. So in a way, the problem with doing that is you are exacerbating the internal contradictions. And I've said this before, but the biggest contradiction of the capitalist system is that you have a group of people where in the system you're incentivized to pay them as little as possible. The problem is you also rely on that same pool of people to purchase goods and services. That's the biggest contradiction in the whole system. That's why we've gone from no debt to tons of debt, and everything has a payment plan now, and nobody can buy a house, so they're renting because nobody has any purchasing power anymore. Because we've let this get so out of control that everybody's just barely getting by. So
the value of the dollar is just collapsed in purchasing power comparatively.
Yeah. And that's just how it's naturally going to go. Because again, under the system, there's incentivization for that to happen. So he can blame the government for enabling corporations all he likes. But at the end of the day, when the government's kind of in bed with these same corporations, and they practically work for them up here in Canada too, you're going to have this kind of collusion, this merger of corporations and state, as who quoted
fascism. Sorry, I got a cough there.
Yeah, some Benito guy. This Benito guy talked about that merging of corporations and state. But it's okay, guys. We live under free, laissez-faire capitalism.
Don't worry, democracy. Democracy.
Or according to the MAGA crowd, Canada's a checks notes communist country. That's
according
always
to the capitalists.
Yeah, everything. It's just gotten to everything I don't like is communism. It's glorious. Actually, it's always been that. What am I talking about? It's been that way
I
since...
agree with Milo here. Being able to save money again would be nice.
That's another thing too. I remember being able to save money. I remember that.
It was nice.
Like,
good times.
I'm pretty sure all of us remember that, where we could just save money. Where it's like, oh, okay, I'll set some money aside. Everybody I know has gotten to the point where they're barely making it to the end of the month, or they're not making it to the end.
Yeah, everyone's now living paycheck to paycheck. Well, the vast majority, not everyone. And it's this stressful situation because it's like, oh, then all of a sudden it's like if you lose your job, it's not okay. I got a little bit of time. I have some savings. It's like you got to find a job now, and you'll take the shittiest job you can. And that's what
I know. I had to do that. I literally had to do that. I got laid off. One of my past companies did that thing where it's like we're gonna axe a bunch of North Americans because we don't want to pay a living wage. We're gonna hire a bunch of people overseas because it's like, $1 or $3 an hour versus like $25 or $30 an hour. And I took whatever I could. So for a year I just took some, whatever customer service job where I was just kind of on the phones and whatever, and it kind of sucked. It was also, yeah, and it was just to provide for my family because it's like I don't have the luxury of time of looking for something better. And thankfully, I'm with a good company now that treats me well. But at the end of the day, it's like we don't have that luxury anymore, and that's and it's kind of a trap that I feel a lot of Canadians are stuck in, where it's like you don't hold any cards at all. Because if your employee just lets you go, then you're in a real battle for survival. You don't have any cards. And so we'll get to the rest of the news, but I think that's a good segue into thinking. I personally think the only way out of this is a general strike. And here's my theory, and let me know what you think of it. I was riffing this back and forth with my Twitter buddy. I don't think we even need a general strike. I think we need just the threat of one. I think I think that's enough. I think all we need is the government, corporations to realize that we have enough solidarity. If we want, we can shut this shit down. Because everybody can say whatever they want about the trucker convoy up in Canada, up here. People can say whatever they want. I'm not, everybody has their opinions about mandates or how our government's handled COVID. I'll go on record saying horribly, but I didn't expect anything else under this system. I expected them to do exactly this, which was fuck it up completely. I didn't think they were going to have any other solutions than that. Also,
oh yeah, no.
Taking it in good faith with a novel virus, I'm also not opposed to like maybe this is the best we could just do as a species. Maybe this is just all you can do with a completely unknown variable that, like we've never had a response to this before. And our government's barely handled just normal stuff as it is. Like the CRA still can't keep track of like basic documents that I send them. I'm expecting them to handle a deadly pandemic. Like what are we doing here? Can't even send an email. I called the CRA to try and get my account fixed because I still can't get online. And one of the dudes that I talked to was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I guess it doesn't work." I'm like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, we can't figure it out." And I'm like, "So that's it? I just can't log in?"
No, you're no longer a Canadian.
Yeah. So
your trade papers will be in the mail.
Pretty much. My theory is that all we need is a threat of a general strike. All we need to do, and this will obviously take a lot of organizing, I think a lot of reaching out to like different unions across the country. But again, you can say what you want about the trucker convoy, but they went out, they disrupted capital, and those mandates went away very quick.
Yep.
And they knew it. They knew it because all the media outlets were talking about them going away, and they were all in parentheses. It's not because of the truckers. And it's like, what that communicated to me was like the fact that you had to make a point of saying that the government isn't getting rid of the mandates because of the truckers. The fact you had to make a point of saying that means you don't want people thinking, hey, direct action works.
Yep.
That's what I think that was. Because
I think you're probably 100% correct on that one.
Because I mean, you didn't need to say that. You could have just said the mandates are going away. Could have just the fact you felt obligated to put that in there was deliberate. And that's because it worked.
You filthy liars. Yep.
They went out and they disrupted capital, and at the end of the day, they achieved their objective. Mandates went away. And I feel like that on a higher level is what I think we need most, not only in Canada, but in the States as well. And I feel like, what do you think about this? I feel like, because a general strike is big and it sounds terrifying, right? It sounds like, oh my God, okay, we need mutual aid, we need like supplies, or we need to save money, and that's scary because nobody can save money. All I think we need is them to see that we're capable of doing it. Even 2 days. And like the trucker convoy, mind you, that was just Ottawa, that was just blocking one major trade route. Imagine the whole country shutting down. I think after 24 hours, they'd be on their knees begging.
Oh, yeah. They wouldn't have any idea what to do. Because their whole, like everything they do is all based on their control. And if they suddenly lose control, they're not going to be happy.
Not to mention, like those profits, people in boardrooms across the country would be losing their minds.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all you would need is a demonstration, a little taste, if you will. Obviously, this will take a lot of, getting your communities together, getting people together online, getting like, if someone were to set up like a central hub where everybody could just kind of get solidarity, it also means talking to people who aren't ideologically identical. Sorry, everybody. That's just every single successful working class movement that's ever happened. The one thing they all had in common is they didn't do this weird purity testing crap. It was just like, how do you feel about guns? How do you feel about LGBTQ? No, they're like, hey, you're a worker. I'm a worker. We have a common interest. Our material conditions. Let's get some stuff done. That was it. That was all. So all you would really need to do, I feel, and I'm kind of joking, but kind of not at this. Like, if you have a couple days off at work banked, this might just be it. But like, what if everybody just took the same
Everyone's taking the time off now.
Everybody went on like a week vacation at the same time, use their paid vacation days. So like, it didn't even hurt anybody really. They had like just a week off.
Just like,
but like, but the organization of it, the ruling class seeing that the workers are in such solidarity that they're able to just shut the faucet off completely. I feel like that would be enough, because all they need is that threat of like, oh God, they could just shut everything down.
Yeah, because all they need to know is that we figured out that we're in control. Because once that happens, they're screwed.
Yeah. And then, of course, like, I'm not saying we don't need to be ready to fall through. But that's something we're going to talk about more on this show, too. And how to become more sustainable. My wife and I just set up a garden.
Nice.
We got and the second I was done, my Mastiff sat in the garden. So that was good, too.
What type of Mastiff?
He's a mix. He's kind of like a Massador. So Mastiff, got some lab, probably got some bully in him too. But yeah, he's a big boy. But he just, the second I was done, he just went and just planted his ass right in the garden. I'm like, that's exactly what I thought you were gonna do. You're just like, Dad worked all day on this, and now I'm going to sit on it. Well, because a dog's probably like, oh, Dad did this for me. But I digress. So we're working on the garden stuff. Got some good soil. We've got some herbs like we got peppermint, and then we got a lot of lettuce because my wife loves lettuce. I love lettuce too. Beets, eggplant. That's a me thing. I love eggplant. I don't know.
Really, I hate eggplant.
A lot of people do. I like grilling it. That's my thing. I don't like it just normally because it's just weird. But if you grill it and get some butter and some garlic on there, it can be really good.
Nice.
So we got that. We got radishes. Radishes are like, they're pretty close to like a superfood. We got cucumber. So we got a good mix of everything in there. But that's kind of a step you can take and a step everybody can take to become like more sustainable and less reliant on the system. Because the downside of the trucker convoy is like, okay, well, once they start to exercise their power, like, look what happened up here. People's bank accounts got shut off. People were arrested. They brought out the jackboots. So at the end of the day, you also have to be able to sustain an actual general strike. And that's something that's something we need to be ready for as well. Because at the end of the day, what if like the threat isn't enough? My instinct tells me it is. My gut tells me it is, because at the end of the day, just the way corporations think, just the way capitalists think in general, that looming threat, that unpredictability, instilling enough uncertainty, that's going to cause a lot of ripples. That's going to give us a lot of bargaining power. But at the end of the day, us all being in such solidarity and connected enough that we become almost like a federation of unions.
Yep.
A bunch of people who are so well connected that it's like, okay, if you guys don't get your act together, we're going to shut this down. We're going to shut this down. We're going to shut this down. We're going to shut this down.
Oh, sort of kind of like a united socialist series of republics.
Look, I'm just trying to get everybody on board with a revolution, okay? Like, don't give the game away. That's always where we are going. Oh, so we're going to general strike now? JK, we are, it is, I am loading Lenin.exe. But I think for the working class to get a real shot at having real power, and that's what we lack. They hold all the cards, we hold none. A shot at the working class getting real power, I think, is us at least taking steps for them to see that we have power. Because again, stuff like the trucker convoy, I mean, it was far different from other protests or other movements, because a lot of other movements, people just stood there, they marched, and I'm all here for protests and marching and demonstrations. I love that stuff. I never want it to go away.
Yeah.
But I feel like the people in power kind of just sit there and wait for it to stop.
Yeah,
And
they'll know they'll get bored eventually.
Yeah. And with the trucker convoy, they didn't have that option. They had to act. They had to do something about it. Because they were like, no, we know you're just gonna wait for us to go away. So we're gonna keep ramping this up. Like I said before, regardless of what people think, that's a good model. That's a very good model. You go out and you disrupt capital.
Yep.
And that's how you might be able to bring about change. But
time to shake the chains.
Exactly. But I digress. I do hope this was educational for everybody. You know, we're going to be getting more into it in later episodes, kind of, you know, breaking down. I'm gonna write that down too. We should do Yeti. We should do an episode on like the key players in Canadian politics.
Even some of the families.
Yep, that too. You know, just key players in Canadian politics across the board, not just the figurehead politicians, but you know, some of the ties they have. You know, kind of. You know,
see what connections kind of go where.
Yeah, maybe we could do an episode of like Justin Trudeau's best disguises. You know, one day he was a Native American, the other day he was. Yeah, I don't know why he does that. We if you guys are wondering, like, why does he have so many like weird dress up things going on? I don't know what to say. We don't know either. We don't know why one day he's just like, I'm gonna dress like Hitler. Actually, retrospectively, I think I know why he did that. It makes a lot more sense now in hindsight. But yeah, that'd be a good one too. To you know, just do a key players sort of thing. Maybe make some references of like, this guy's kind of like your version of that guy.
Yeah, that's true. That could work. Tie in some gardening tips as well.
Yeah, That'd be a good one too. Gardening tips, because I would love that because I could use gardening tips. We just
You can
started the
read.
garden thing.
You can read my articles I wrote on gardening
Hmm.
on Substack. There's only a few articles, but it's going over like soils, soil makeup, and then I think I went over nutrients. I think my last article was micronutrients.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe we could feature some of those articles on the show.
Yeah, I'll get
And
back
help
to
some
writing.
people.
So, yeah.
One thing that would be interesting to get into is like the idea of any kind of like gardening or food production during the winter months.
Mhm.
That would be interesting to do. Because I know some people who do that.
That's what I'm planning to do. There's a greenhouse called, it's referred to as a Chinese solar greenhouse, but what it is it's a passive greenhouse. So you have like a wall of material that can hold heat. So you can do it with like water, sand, a couple of different things. And what it does is it holds a thermal mass during the sun, and then during the night you have a like a thermal tarp that comes down that holds the heat in. So all the heat during the winter keeps your greenhouse heated through the night, and then when the sun comes up, the tarp goes over and then it heats again, and all that thermal mass is held again till the next night.
That's cool. That's
I
really
actually
cool.
I've been drawing one up actually. This
Nice.
is like those big 1,000-liter white water tanks.
Mhm.
So it's going to be 3x5. So it'll be 15 of these. Then at the top here, oops, sorry, it's coming out.
All good. I do that all the time.
Focus. There we go.
There you go.
And then, so the bottom will just be your ground. This is going to be a bee box because we're going to be raising bees as well. And so it's going to have an inside and outside. So during the summer, it will be able to pollinate everything inside.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. And it's all going to be solar powered too, as well.
Oh, that's great. That's another one I got to get on. One of those like started off just by like saving some like, energy on your saving some money on your power bill. But yeah, I mean, we live in an age of technology where, just making the right investments in this sort of stuff can really
Using
we
it
have a
the proper
solar
way.
Yeah, we got like a little solar powered like power generator as it is. So like that's kind of cool. We never had that growing up. Whereas, if the power goes out, we still have like a source of power at least.
Yep.
But
That's a really good idea too.
Preparing yourself to just be less reliant on these structures that we're kind of slaves to, because the reality is like A, they can fail, which sucks, but B, the government can always take it away.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could, I don't know, something could happen that puts you in peril.
Yeah.
And at that point, the more prepared you are, the better you're going to be.
Mm-hmm. That's why I'm so heavily like pushing for 3D printing and stuff. Like, because this is going to turn into a wind turbine that will generate power. So it is. It's just as you rotate, but it connects to each point. So you can go up, and then these have connector points here. So eventually, these will be screwed onto each other. And then I have pieces to make a motor mount and some little gears. So we have gears here that'll just go in to turn it. It's a herringbone gear, I believe, is the name. But then you've got parts for the internal metal screw you're gonna need to like to stack them I know how to speak English, I swear. And then you would just put a, actually conveniently, you can use a stepper motor that I have extras from a 3D printer to hold it in, and then that's going to be what generates power for you. But my plan is to build a bigger system eventually.
Nice.
It's just to test them right now.
Well, I think that's super important. Because I mean, worst case scenario, you know, finally one of these Western countries just, you know, fires the wrong missile.
Yeah.
And Russia's like, all right, sorry guys, we've been really patient, but yeah, we're done. And then it's fallout, and we all got to learn. We all got to be prepared for whether or not we're gonna live in fallout. So this is all helpful. And at the end of the day, there's no loss because there's always benefits. If you've got a garden, that's food you're saving on. That's money you're saving on your food bill. If you've got extra sources of energy, that's what you're saving on your power bill. So you're just doing things to reduce the cost of living and reduce your reliance on these systems.
Yep.
Very important. So I'm personally super excited for that part.
Yeah. Well, it's the only way to take back freedom. For all those freedom conservatives, you want to be free? Start growing your own food. Start figuring out how to do your own power system. I know they hate solar and wind technology, but you're going to need it. So might as well learn it.
I mean, unless you build a nuclear plant, make it meltdown proof. Not like anybody does that though.
Nope.
Or like, I don't know, unless you're gonna drill for oil, like you might as well take the steps you want to take in order to make yourself more sustainable.
Yep.
Because, you know, and it's a good feeling too.
Yeah.
Like, I can think of that feeling where it's like, okay, because everybody has that anxiety constantly. We all have that anxiety of like, what if the worst thing, you see some scary thing in the news and you're like, oh my God, is this it? Everybody's like, is this it? Oh, an EMP is going to have, oh God, here it comes. You know, having that like soothing effect of like, oh, we'll all be okay. We've got some precautions. That's better than just being like, oh, well, I hope my government's going to come and bail me out.
I wonder if I just put tinfoil around my computer. Will it help? EMP attacked? Computer still works. Ha ha!
I think that's where the tinfoil hack came from.
I think you're right, actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
I think it was to prevent, I think the original one was like, it was to prevent like aliens from like, but I remember it would block waves. Yeah, it would block waves, and that's why they wore it. And that's kind of where it all came from. But I mean, with everything in this life, though, I imagine if you actually looked up the science behind that, there's probably something behind it that's actually credible.
Oh yeah,
there always is.
Well, even that 5G like the G5 or 5G waves and stuff, there is some science behind the theory. Like, it's not just some guy was like, no, radio waves are bad. I told you. There is some theory.
All right, y'all. Well, we're coming on time at 2 hours here. Thank you guys for being super understanding while my internet took a dump. I will definitely be working on that, and that will absolutely be sorted out, at least for Politically Homeless on Thursday. It's got a bunch of people I gotta yell at. But no, I'm 90% sure I know how to fix this, so we'll be good.
That's good.
Yeti, were there any closing thoughts you'd like to have? Where's yours, my friend?
I just want to thank everyone for joining us, and the interactions in the chat was nice, especially while Himbo was gone. So we had some more topics to discuss. I had a great time. I look forward to doing the next one. So,
Yep, we'll have yeah, way to hold down the fort indeed. But yeah, we'll have plenty to cover. We got a lot more Canada to dive into. And then once we have a solid foundation of like, understanding, then we'll be at a good place to kind of parse a lot of the events that are transpiring up here, especially ones involving international affairs. Spoiler alert, we're every bit as shitty as America is in that regard. In some regards worse. I hate to report. But yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. This was episode 1 of the Maple Files, and I will see everybody bright and late on next Monday. And check the INN schedule for all the other shows this week. And yeah, thanks a lot, everybody.